So this is the Luke 10 R&D team. It meets together virtually every Friday morning. And part of what we do is Kent Smith and Kent Larson and Toni Daniels. And part of what we do is share appreciation stories. And Kent Smith had heard a story from Toni about something pretty amazing that the Lord did. And so we thought this was so important that we ought to record it. So Toni, what's the story?
Sure. I'll change the names to protect the innocent. But we were in Uruguay, and we were meeting with our intentional community down there. And Martin is one of the, he's kind of a member of the community. He doesn't live out on the property, but he has been friends with Nico, the leader, who's down there, friends with him for many years. He's a medical doctor, and he really goes out there and spends nights just to be with the community. So we're entering into conversation with him. He came in one night on the end of a very interesting conversation about demons and spirits and things like that. I was like, I had no idea where he was spiritually, and so I was sensitive to his presence in the room. And so after we finished the conversation with Hillary and Nico, I turned and I just said, where are you with all of this? Like, is this blowing your mind? And he's, oh, no, I know demons are there. I believe in spirits. I've experienced them. And I'm like, wow, okay, well, tell me about this. And so he begins to talk about how he has no religion, how he was exposed to spiritism in Brazil, in the northern part of Uruguay, near Brazil, because that's very common up there, and how he's seen both, good spirits and evil spirits, and how he practices with spiritists sometimes. I don't even know what that meant, but so I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be difficult because there's going to be spiritual warfare in this. Like, this is going to be hard. But I knew he had had this close relationship with Nico for years. So I knew he had heard about Jesus and experienced him through Nico many times. So I just said, can you, we got into a long conversation about being a doctor. And he said, sometimes in my practice, people come in and they just need to be seen. They're not really sick. They just need someone to listen to them. And so I'll listen to them. And, I'll even pray the Lord's Prayer over them. And then he goes on and on and on. And we talked for like 10 more minutes. And I said, can I ask you a question? He said, yeah. I said, why would you pray the Lord's Prayer over people if you're not a Christ follower? Like, that's just odd to me. And he says, well, because it works. And I was like, what? And he said, for whatever reason, praying the Lord's Prayer with people works. And if it works, I'm going to do it. And I was like, that's fascinating. And I said, so I'm just going to have to ask you, Martin, when it comes down to it, what do you make of Christ himself? Like, I know you've heard of him. You've had to have knowing Nico. Like, what do you make of him? And he says, well, to be perfectly honest with you, I think he's an amazing man. I just don't believe he's all good. And I was like, really? Wow. I said, well, tell me a little bit about that. And he goes on and just talks about how, his view of Christ. And in the end, he says, and what I really like about Christ is that he came so that we could know how to give justice to others and how to bring about a better society. And I said, is that really why he came? And he said, well, yeah, that's why I think he came. I said, I don't think that's why he came. And of course, then he's like, what? He said, well, why did he come? And I said, Nico, why did Jesus come? It's right there in the scriptures. And Nico's blown away at this point too, because they're very much, he's a social worker. So, they're very much into that. And Nico says, oh, he came that we might have life and have it abundantly. And I was like, wow. I said, yeah. And so just opened up a door to talk with Nico about joy and what joy was. And so I just explained him a little bit about how I see God coming to give us joy. And that joy that we have, once we know him intimately, will overflow and bring joy and peace and justice and all those things into the world. And he said, that's what I believe. That's what I believe. I've just never felt it. And so we went on and talked a little bit more about therapies and all kinds of things that he's into and the body. And I said, I really do. I practice, I incorporate all those things in something called Immanuel prayer. I said, I explained to him appreciation and how Jesus finds us there and uses our body sensations and our emotions and speaks to us. And so I tell him all about it. And then I finally, at the end, I'm like, I just felt God say, go for it. And I said, Martin, would you like to try this? I said, we've got at least 30 more minutes before bedtime. You want to try this? And he goes, yeah, why not? So fastest Immanuel session I've ever been in my life. I could not believe that it went so easy. He went to an appreciation memory, connected immediately, sensed God's presence there as an energy flowing around the room, bringing joy all around the people. And then I said, well, what does God want you to know? Ask him, what is it you want me to know about this memory? And he starts laughing. And he says, God is telling me I am foolish. And I was like, then I was kind of scared it wasn't God. I'm like, well, tell me about that. Like, what's going on there? And he goes, no, he's telling me that I need to stop doubting him, that I need to stop doubting that he's all good, that I need to give my doubts and fears over to him. And I said, well, do you know what you're afraid of? I said, can you do that? Can you get all of your fears and everything and give it to God? And he says, no, I'm really afraid. And I said, well, what are you afraid of? He says, I don't even know. And I said, why don't you ask God? So he goes to God back in his memory, and he asks him, and he says, I'm afraid he's going to abandon me.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. I said, well, Martin, would you be willing to ask Jesus if he would like to take you to a memory and heal you from that fear? And he said, yeah. I said, okay, do it. So he asked God, and I mean, like that, he's in a memory, and like that, he's already seeing Jesus. I'm like, wait, you got to go through the steps. It was like instantaneous. He's in a plaza, and he said his mom had abandoned him, and he's on the ground in the plaza crying. And he says, Jesus is there. And I'm like, what? Really? Already? It's like, yeah. And he says, now I see him in his physical state. I can actually see his body and everything. He's right in front of me. And I said, well, what does he want you to know? And he said, he's got his arms out, and he's saying to me, I have never abandoned you, my son. I'm right here for you, and I love you. I'm right here. Come to me. I'm right here. And I said, Martin, what do you want to do? And he said, it's starting to feel better. I'm starting to feel better. And I said, are you looking at him? What are you doing? And he says, no, I'm still crumpled down. And I said, well, would you like to just give him, to thank him for being there for you? He says, yeah. And I said, okay, well, why don't you just thank him for being there for you? And so he starts to thank him. And I said, what's going on? What's happening? And he says, I stood up, and he's facing me now. And he's just saying, come to me, come to me. And I said, do you think you could give all your doubts to him now? Like, do you think you could gather all your fear and all your doubt and just hand them to Jesus and give your life to him? And he said, yeah. I said, okay, go ahead. He goes, okay. And so in his imagination right there, he gathered everything and he handed it over to Jesus Christ. And then I said, will you let me know what's happening? And he says, oh, he's just holding me. He's just holding me. And I said, how, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you, how much afraid are you that he's going to abandon you? And he says, oh, a 1, a 0 or a 1. And I said, ask God whenever you want to feel his presence, can you go back to this memory? And he says, okay. And he asks him, and he says, oh yeah. He says, every day, every minute, I can be right here and I can feel him with me. From now on, I never have to be alone again.
Wow.
And then he opened his eyes and he looked at me like, what in the world just happened to me? And then he said, I'm ready to train. I'm ready to train. I said, Martin, you just went to one appreciation memory and look what just happened to you. Imagine if you did this every day. If you went to a different appreciation memory every day to sense God's presence, what would happen to you? And he says, I'm ready to train. Sign me up now.
All right.
I said, okay. So the next day he told the leaders of our center, he says, I want to come out in 2 weeks and do a whole week of spiritual retreat. And so they came to me and they said, what did you do to him? What happened last night? So I'm very, very, it was amazing. That's all I can say. I'm like, this is a whole new way of people, for me, of people coming to Christ, of letting him remove their fears, letting him remove their doubts, letting him take them straight to the root of why they're not giving their life to him, and then inviting them to do that. It was amazing.
So this would be Immanuel Evangelism.
Definitely.
And all this took place in Spanish, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Toni, thank you. That is a wonderful story. Very
Thanks.
cool.